It started with the sound of leaves under his boots. That soft, papery shuffle you only hear in October, when the air is cool enough to sting your nose and the trees seem to whisper things you shouldn't understand. Eli Turner hadn't walked this trail in years. Not since his father used to bring him here to fish in the creek. Now, at 36, he'd come back for no clear reason. Just an urge to get away from the hum of his apartment and the loneliness that came with it. The woods behind Millbrook Lake hadn't changed much. The same narrow trail, the same crooked pines, the same rusted sign nailed to a tree. Private property, no dumping. The town council had been arguing about cleaning it up for years. No one ever did. He paused at a small clearing where the light spilled through bare branches. That's when he saw it, half buried under a layer of damp leaves, beside a fallen log. A wallet, old leather cracked at the edges. Brown, the kind that used to be popular in the early 90s. He almost walked past it, thinking it was just junk. But something about the color caught his eye, like it didn't belong here anymore. He knelt down, brushed away the dirt. The clasp was rusted but still held firm. He opened it carefully. Inside was a faded photograph. A teenage girl smiling in what looked like a school hallway, the edges curled from time. There was also an ID card. Millbrook High School, class of 1993. Name Rachel Ellison. Grade 11. The photo on the ID matched the one tucked inside. Long brown hair, pale face, a shy smile. Eli's breath caught. He remembered that name. Everyone from Millbrook did. Back in '93, Rachel Ellison had disappeared. She was 16. One Saturday night, she left a friend's house around 9 p.m., walking home like she always did. She never made it. Her family had lived on the north side of town, 3 blocks from where the woods began. For months, the search parties went through every trail, every creek bed, every abandoned shed. Volunteers from the high school came out, carrying flashlights and prayer candles. The town printed her face on every telephone pole, every store window. Nothing was ever found. By spring, the posters faded. The candles melted. People moved on. But not entirely. Eli had been just 4 years younger than Rachel. A kid in middle school then, and he still remembered the police cars parked outside the Ellisons' house for weeks. He remembered how his mother told him not to go near the woods that summer. How his father said quietly, "That poor girl's gone, son. Some things you just don't get answers for." And now, 32 years later, her wallet lay in his hands. Eli turned the ID over. The plastic had yellowed, but the lamination still held. He could almost hear the crackle of those old-school printers, the kind that printed names just slightly off-center. There were a few other things inside. A few coins, a bus pass stub, a folded note that was too damp to open without tearing. He placed everything back carefully, then sat down on the log, staring at the wallet like it might explain itself. Maybe someone else dropped it here. Maybe it wasn't hers, just coincidence. But that wasn't possible. The name, the year, the face. He glanced toward the trees. The woods were quiet, too quiet. Only the distant creak of branches and the faint rush of wind. He slipped the wallet into his jacket pocket. As he started walking back toward the road, something heavy settled in his chest. The kind of feeling that comes before you realize your life is about to bend in a direction you didn't expect. At home, Eli set the wallet on the kitchen table and just looked at it. The light from the window fell across the photo, making the girl's smile seem alive again. He made coffee he didn't drink. Then he searched online, typing Rachel Ellison Millbrook into the search bar. The first result was a newspaper archive, the Millbrook Chronicle, November 1993. Local teens still missing after 2 weeks. The article was short, written in that stiff journalistic tone of the time. It mentioned the police's active investigation, the volunteer search teams, and a quote from Rachel's mother, "We just want our daughter home." Scrolling further, there was another headline from the following year. Case of missing teens still unsolved. And that was it. No more updates. No arrests. No closure. He closed the laptop. The sound of the click felt final, like closing a door. Eli sat there for a long time. The wallet seemed to stare back at him. He wasn't sure what he felt. Curiosity, sadness, or something deeper, like responsibility. He'd found something that belonged to a ghost. He could call the police, he thought. But what would he even say? That he found an old wallet in the woods from a 30-year-old missing person case? They'd probably take it, file a report, and forget. Something in him didn't want that. He wanted to know how it ended up there. So that night, he drove to the edge of town. The old Ellison house was still standing, small, white, with peeling paint and a swing set out front that no longer swung. A for sale sign leaned sideways in the yard. He parked across the street and just sat there, watching the dark windows. He wondered if anyone ever came back. After a few minutes, a porch light flickered on next door. An elderly man stepped out, letting his dog into the yard. Eli hesitated, then rolled down his window. "Excuse me, sir," he called softly. "Do you know who used to live there?" The man squinted through the porch light. "The Ellisons. Long time ago." "Why?" Eli hesitated. "Just remembering. I found something today. Belonged to Rachel, I think." The man frowned. "Rachel Ellison? You found what?" "A wallet. In the woods. Near the creek." The man's expression changed, softer now, uncertain. He stepped closer to the fence. "My wife went to school with her. Sweet kid. That case," he shook his head, "broke everyone's heart." "Do you know what happened?" Eli asked. "Not really. Some folks thought she ran off. Others thought she met someone. Police never said much." The man glanced toward the woods, just visible beyond the streetlights. "They searched there, whole week. Didn't find a thing." Eli nodded. "I'll, probably take it to the police tomorrow. That'd be the right thing to do." The man paused. "You said you found it where?" Eli pointed vaguely north. "Near the old path by Millbrook Lake." The man went quiet for a moment. "That trail's been closed off since the late 90s. Flooded years back. Hardly anyone goes there now." Eli thanked him and drove off, his thoughts spinning. That night he couldn't sleep. He left the wallet on the nightstand, but its presence filled the room like a pulse. He kept seeing her face, that smile frozen in the laminated ID. What if this was something the family never got back? What if returning it could bring them something? Closure, maybe? The next morning, he called the Millbrook Police Department. The dispatcher transferred him to Detective Myers, who'd been there since the early 2000s. When Eli explained what he'd found, Myers went quiet. Then he said, "You mind bringing that in?" At the station, Myers examined the wallet under a desk lamp. "Yeah, that's hers all right. We still have her case file somewhere in the archives." He flipped through the contents, pulling out the ID carefully. "Where exactly did you find it?" "About half a mile from the old fishing trail. Near the creek." Myers frowned. "That's strange. We combed that area more than once. Back in the day, it was all mud after a flood." "You sure it wasn't planted there recently?" Eli shook his head. "It was buried pretty deep. Wet leaves, dirt. Been there a long time." The detective nodded slowly. "We'll send it to the lab, see if anything turns up. Doubt there's much left to test, though." He handed Eli a clipboard. "Write down your info. We might need to ask you a few more questions later." Eli scribbled his name and number. As he left the station, he felt a mix of relief and unease. He'd done the right thing, turned it in. But something didn't sit right. He'd found it too easily, like it had been waiting for him. That evening, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Turner?" a woman's voice asked. "This is Clara Ellison. Detective Myers gave me your number. He said you found something that belonged to my sister." Eli froze. "Yes, ma'am. I found her wallet. In the woods." She paused. Her voice trembled just slightly. "Could we talk? I'd like to see where you found it." They agreed to meet the next morning. When Eli pulled up by the old trail, Clara was already there. She was in her late 40s now, hair pulled back, wearing a heavy coat. Her eyes looked tired but kind. He led her along the narrow path, explaining how he'd found it under the log. She listened quietly, nodding. When they reached the spot, she stopped. "This is where we searched," she whispered. "Dad came here every day that winter. He never believed she ran away. Eli didn't know what to say. He just stood there as she knelt and touched the ground, brushing the leaves aside as though hoping to feel something left behind. "She used to come here," Clara said softly. "There's a trail that goes down to the water. She'd bring her sketchbook. Said the woods made her feel peaceful." Eli looked around. The creek shimmered faintly in the morning light. A crow cawed somewhere far off. "Why do you think the wallet was here?" he asked. Clara sighed. "If she dropped it that night, the rain could have buried it. Or maybe someone threw it away. Hard to say." She stood, brushing off her hands. "But finding it now, maybe it means something." "Like what?" "Like she wants to be remembered, right?" They talked for a while longer, about Rachel, about the years after, how the family eventually moved away. Clara said their parents had both passed. She was the only one left who still came back sometimes. When they parted, she thanked him with a small, sincere smile. "You gave me something I thought I'd never have again," she said. "A piece of her." As Eli watched her car disappear down the road, he felt a strange stillness settle over the woods. Not eerie, peaceful. Like something unfinished had finally stirred awake. But later that week, he got a call from Detective Myers. "Mr. Turner," the detective said, his voice lower now. "We got the lab results back. The wallet's definitely from the 90s, no doubt there. But here's the odd part. There's a set of partial prints inside that don't match Rachel or anyone in her family. Fresh ones, from maybe a few months ago." Eli's chest tightened. "Fresh? Are you saying someone else had it recently?" "Looks that way. Maybe found it, handled it, then dropped it again. We're checking local records." "You sure you were the first one to find it there?" "Yes," Eli said quietly. "I'm sure." There was a pause. "All right. If you remember anything else, give us a call." When the line clicked off, Eli just stood there in the quiet of his kitchen, the detective's words echoing in his head. Fresh prints. Someone else had touched that wallet. Recently. He looked out the window at the dark woods beyond the town. The same woods that had swallowed a girl 32 years ago, and now seemed to be whispering again. He didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The next few days passed like fog. Eli went to work, came home, and pretended not to think about it. But every quiet moment, every silence between commercials, every shadow that crossed his window, pulled him back to the woods, to that wallet, to the face of the girl who'd vanished before he ever finished high school. He told himself it wasn't his problem anymore. He'd handed it to the police, he'd spoken to her sister, he'd done his part. But the truth was, the story had opened something inside him. A space he didn't know had been hollow all along. That night, he sat at his desk, scrolling through old archives again. Not on the big news sites this time, but the small, forgotten corners of the internet, the kind that still hosted scanned newspaper clippings, local blogs, and online message boards with yellowed backgrounds and flickering ads. He found a thread from 2008 titled, "Unsolved Millbrook Cases." It had only 5 replies. The first post was from someone named JStone97, who wrote, "My cousin went to Millbrook High with Rachel Ellison. Said she was quiet, artistic, didn't have many friends. Last person to see her was a teacher who thought she got into a blue pickup near the library. No one ever found the driver." Eli frowned. He didn't remember that detail from any article. He kept scrolling. Another reply mentioned that Rachel's art teacher had left town soon after she disappeared. Moved out west. Never spoke about her again. There was no verification, no sources, just fragments of rumor from people who half-remembered things. But something about that blue pickup stuck with him. The next morning, Eli drove to the Millbrook Public Library. It was smaller than he remembered. A red brick building with tall windows and the smell of dust and old carpet. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 60s with silver glasses. Her name tag read Pat. "Morning," she greeted warmly. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for old local newspapers," Eli said. "From the early 90s. Around November 1993. Pat raised an eyebrow. "You researching something?" "Just a story," he said. She led him to a corner with 2 microfilm machines and several boxes labeled by year. "These go back to 1989, she said. The Chronicle went digital around 2004. You'll find what you need here. He thanked her and began feeding rolls of film into the reader, scrolling through faint headlines that flickered across the screen. Local fairs, car accidents, high school sports, then missing teen. Search continues. The article was longer than the one he'd seen online. It mentioned that Rachel had been last seen near the Millbrook Library, where she had reportedly gone to return books before heading home. A witness, unidentified, had seen her speaking with a man in a dark-colored pickup truck. Eli leaned closer. The police had appealed for anyone with information to come forward, but no follow-up articles ever mentioned that lead again. He wrote down the date, November 6, 1993. When he turned off the machine, Pat was shelving books nearby. He hesitated, then asked, "Did you work here back then?" She smiled faintly. "I did. Long time ago. Do you remember Rachel Ellison?" Pat's smile faded. "Of course I do. Everyone does." She paused. "She came in that evening. I remember because she always borrowed the same kind of books, sketching, art history. She had a gentle way about her. Never loud. Always polite." Eli nodded slowly. "Do you remember who she left with?" Pat looked down, thinking. "Not exactly. It was dark out. But I do remember seeing a truck idling near the curb when she walked out. Old model, blue or green, maybe. I couldn't see who was inside." He felt a chill. "Did you tell the police that?" "I did," she said softly. "They took my statement. But after that, no one ever followed up. I always wondered if I saw something I wasn't supposed to." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Pat said, "I hope you find what you're looking for, young man. Some ghosts just want someone to listen." That night, Eli couldn't stop thinking about the teacher who left town. He called Clara Ellison again. She answered on the second ring. "Hello. It's Eli," he said. "I was looking at old records. Do you remember who your sister's art teacher was?" Clara hesitated. "Mr. Harland. Robert Harland." "Why?" "I read somewhere he left town soon after she disappeared." "Yes," she said quietly. "He was questioned. Nothing came of it. He said he was moving to Oregon to take care of his father. The police cleared him." "Why are you asking?" Eli hesitated. "Just trying to understand what happened. I found an article that mentioned she might have talked to someone in a pickup that night. Do you remember if he drove one?" There was a pause. "Yes," Clara said slowly. "A blue Chevy. But a lot of people had those back then." Eli's heart sank. He thanked her, but she stopped him before he hung up. "Eli," she said, "I appreciate what you're doing, really, but be careful. My family spent years trying to make sense of it. It nearly ruined us. Don't let it ruin you too." He promised he wouldn't, but even as he said it, he knew he already couldn't stop. The next day, Eli drove to the old Millbrook High School, now converted into a community center. He signed in at the front desk and explained that he was researching local history. The receptionist, a man in his 20s, led him to the dusty archive room that stored old yearbooks and trophies. He found the 1993 yearbook on a lower shelf. There she was, Rachel Ellison, smiling shyly in the junior class photo, her name printed neatly beneath. He flipped through the staff pages. Robert Harland, Art Department. In his photo, Harland looked to be in his late 30s. Clean-cut, quiet eyes. Eli studied the picture for a long moment. Then he turned the page and froze. Tucked between the glossy sheets was a scrap of paper, yellowed with age. Someone had used it as a bookmark years ago. Written in faded blue ink were just 4 words. "Meet me by the lake." No name, no date, just those words. He stared at it for a long time before sliding it into his pocket. That evening, the phone rang again. Detective Myers. "Turner," he said, "we got something interesting from that wallet. The prints we found, fresh ones, belong to a man named Howard Pike. He's got a record. Minor offenses. Trespassing, vagrancy, that kind of thing." "Who is he?" "Used to do maintenance work around the county. Live's rough now. Last known address was a cabin near the old quarry, about 2 miles from where you found the wallet." "Do you think he's connected to Rachel?" Hard to say. Could have found the wallet somewhere else. We're trying to locate him. Eli hung up, heart pounding. He knew the quarry road, the same road that curved toward the woods. That night, against his better judgment, he drove out there. The road was cracked, lined with tall grass. The cabin was half collapsed, its windows boarded. He parked a short distance away and called out softly. "Hello? Anyone here?" No answer. The door creaked when he pushed it open. Inside, it smelled of mildew and smoke. Empty cans, blankets, and a half-burned candle sat on a table. Then he saw it. Tacked to the wall above a pile of old newspapers. A sketch. Pencil on thin paper. Smudged but still clear. It was a drawing of the woods, Millbrook Lake in the background, and a young girl sitting on a log, sketchbook in her lap. Rachel. Eli's stomach turned. He looked closer. In the corner, faintly signed Ari. Her initials. A floorboard creaked behind him. He turned. An older man stood in the doorway, beard overgrown, eyes sunken. His clothes were torn, his hands stained with dirt. "You shouldn't be here," the man said hoarsely. Eli froze. "Are you Howard Pike?" The man's expression flickered, something between confusion and fear. "Who's asking?" "I found something. A wallet. In the woods." The man blinked slowly, his breathing uneven. "That thing again. You found it before, didn't you?" Pike stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slightly. "Months ago, after a storm, washed up by the creek. I thought it was trash until I saw the picture. Pretty girl. What did you do with it?" "I kept it. Don't know why. Guess I felt sorry for her. Used to see her picture everywhere back in the day. Then one night I was walking through those woods and I just dropped it. Didn't want it anymore." Eli stepped closer. "Did you know her?" "No," Pike shook his head. "But I knew him." "Who?" "The man with the truck. He used to come around here. Fishing, hunting. Said he was a teacher. Seemed decent. But he wasn't." Eli's pulse quickened. "Robert Harland?" Pike's eyes narrowed. "That's the name." He looked around nervously, as if the trees outside were listening. "You didn't hear it from me. Man left town quick after that girl went missing. Packed up overnight. Folks said he was sick. Maybe he was." Eli's mouth went dry. "Did you ever tell the police?" "They don't listen to people like me," Pike muttered. "Drifters don't make good witnesses." He turned away, picking up a blanket. "Now you best go. The past don't like being dug up." Eli hesitated, then stepped back toward the door. "Why did you keep her drawing?" he asked quietly. Pike looked at the sketch on the wall. His eyes softened. "Because she drew peace, even in this broken place. Reminded me what it looked like." When Eli returned home, the weight of what he'd learned pressed on him. He called Detective Myers again and told him everything, the cabin, the sketch, what Pike said about Harland. Myers sighed. "We'll check it out." But Harland died in 2010. Car accident in Oregon. Whatever secrets he had went with him. Eli felt hollow. "So that's it." "Maybe," the detective said. "But at least you helped uncover something real. Sometimes that's all we can do." After he hung up, Eli sat in the quiet for a long time, staring at the sketch he'd taken a photo of before leaving the cabin. Rachel by the lake, smiling faintly, her pencil poised above her pad. She'd been gone for over 3 decades, but somehow, through lost ink and faded paper, her presence lingered, soft, patient, forgiving. And though the mystery wasn't solved, something about finding her art in that ruined cabin made Eli believe the truth had already whispered itself through the years. A teacher, a truck, a storm, and a girl who drew peace where none existed. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying the smell of rain and pine. For the first time since that autumn day, Eli felt he could breathe again. He didn't know it yet, but what he'd found wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of letting go. Winter came early that year. The leaves that once whispered secrets had fallen, leaving the woods bare and open, every branch like a line of memory against a gray sky. Eli hadn't gone back to the lake trail since that last conversation with Detective Myers. For a while, he tried to move on, returning to work, to his quiet routines. But something still pulled at him, soft as a breath behind his ear. The story of Rachel Ellison wasn't finished. Not in him. A few weeks before Christmas, he received a small padded envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a copy of an old Millbrook Chronicle article, dated December 1993. The note read, "I thought you should see this. See, Clara." The article described the final search conducted that winter, an effort led by volunteers who combed the woods around the lake one last time before the snow made it impossible. It mentioned how the Ellison family had organized a small memorial by the creek after the search was called off. No body had ever been found. Only a single sketchbook page that had washed up near the waterline weeks later. The drawing was never shown publicly. Eli set the paper down and stared out his window, snow falling like soft static beyond the glass. He wondered if that sketchbook page was the same one Pike had kept pinned to his wall. Maybe not the same page, but the same hand, the same piece. That weekend, he decided to visit Rachel's old home again. The for sale sign was gone now, replaced by a fresh coat of white paint. A couple in their 40s answered the door, new owners. When he explained that he'd known the previous family, they let him walk through the backyard. It was smaller than he remembered. The old swing set was gone, the fence rebuilt. But the air still held that same quiet weight, as if the house remembered. He stood there for a while, his breath visible in the cold air. Sometimes closure doesn't arrive like an answer. Sometimes it just waits for you to come back and see that life kept going. On his way home, he stopped at the small cemetery on Hillcrest Road. The Ellison family plot was near the back, beneath a bare maple tree. There were 3 headstones, the parents, and, beside them, a 4th marker without a date of death. Rachel and Ellison, 1977? Always our light. Eli brushed the snow from the top of the stone and laid a small sprig of pine beside it. He thought about all the years between then and now, about the girl who had walked into the night, the town that had searched and failed, the silence that followed. And then he thought about what Clara had said. Maybe it means she wants to be remembered right. He found Clara again in early January. She was at a small diner off Route 12, sipping coffee, a notebook open in front of her. She smiled when she saw him. "I was hoping I'd hear from you." They talked for a while. About the investigation, about Pike's cabin, about how the police had confirmed the sketch belonged to Rachel after comparing it to old school art projects kept by the family. "The detective said she must have drawn it just before she disappeared," Clara said quietly. "They found her initials on the back, along with a date, November 5, 1993, the night she vanished." Eli listened, the air around them still. "You think she came here that night? To the woods?" "She always said it was her safe place," Clara replied. "Dad used to say the same. I think she went there to think. Maybe to meet someone she trusted." Eli nodded slowly. "And never came back." Clara took a deep breath. "You know, I used to have dreams about her. She'd be sitting by the water, sketching just like that drawing you found. I'd wake up crying, thinking she was trying to tell me she wasn't afraid. That maybe..." She found peace before it ended. She looked down, blinking back tears. "When you found that wallet, Eli, it felt like she was finally saying thank you." He didn't know what to say, so he just sat there, letting her words settle between them like quiet snow. After that day, Eli began spending more time at the lake again. Not searching, just walking. The trail was still rough, still half forgotten, but when the winter sun hit the water, the whole place seemed softer. He'd stop by the log where he'd found the wallet and watch the wind ripple across the creek. Sometimes he'd imagine Rachel there, sitting cross-legged, sketchbook in her lap, drawing the world as she saw it. Not a girl trapped in headlines or rumors, but someone alive in her own small piece. In early spring, a letter arrived from the Millbrook Police Department. The investigation into Rachel Ellison's disappearance was being formally closed. Due to lack of new evidence and the passing of key persons of interest, it read, "The case remains unsolved. However, recovered personal effects have been returned to next of kin." Enclosed was a small envelope with Clara's handwriting. "For you. Thank you for helping us find her again. Inside was a photograph, the same one that had been inside the wallet. But now it was clean, framed in a small matte border. On the back, Clara had written a note. Her favorite quote, "Art doesn't end when the artist does. It becomes the air around us." Eli placed the photo on his shelf. The girl from 1993 smiling faintly into the light. Months passed. The woods turned green again. He found himself volunteering with a local community group that helped document unsolved cases in the county. They called themselves the Remembrance Project. Not investigators, just people who refused to let forgotten names fade away. One afternoon, as he helped archive files in the town hall, he noticed an old ledger from 1993. Scrawled on the back cover were the names of volunteers who'd searched for Rachel that winter. Among them was one he didn't expect, Howard Pike. He stared at it for a long time, a soft ache rising in his chest. The drifter who'd once been written off, who'd lived in that decaying cabin, had searched for her too. Maybe he'd found her sketch years later and kept it not out of guilt, but out of remembrance, because he'd been there when everyone else gave up. Maybe that was why he'd said, "She drew peace." That night, Eli returned once more to the woods. The air was warm now, filled with the sound of crickets. The log where he'd found the wallet was moss-covered, but the clearing felt alive again, less haunted, more whole. He sat there as dusk fell, the sky turning gold through the trees. He took the small photograph from his pocket, Rachel's face glowing faintly in the fading light, and placed it gently in the hollow of the log, beside a new sprig of pine. "Rest easy," he murmured. For a moment the woods seemed utterly still. Then a breeze stirred, carrying the scent of water and earth. The same air she must have breathed the night she came here last. And in that sound, faint and fleeting, he felt something like forgiveness. Not from her, but for her. And maybe, in some quiet way, from himself too, for all the years he'd spent not looking, not asking, not remembering. When he left the woods, the first stars had begun to appear. The road ahead shimmered with the reflection of the moon, and somewhere far off, a single owl called through the dark. Eli smiled faintly, feeling lighter than he had in years. He knew the mystery would never be solved, not in a way the world would understand. But in the stillness of that clearing, he'd felt something close enough to truth, that some stories aren't about finding what's lost. They're about remembering what remains. And what remained was this: a wallet, a drawing, and the memory of a girl who once saw beauty where others saw only shadows. A few months later, the Millbrook Chronicle published a small column titled, "Local Man Helps Family Recover Lost Items from 1993 Missing Case." It didn't mention names, just a short paragraph about closure, kindness, and how even the smallest discoveries can heal old wounds. Eli clipped the article and tucked it into the same notebook where he'd written his first notes about Rachel. Then he closed it, placed it on his shelf, and turned off the light. Through the window, the night stretched silent and calm, and somewhere beyond the trees, where the water still whispered against the shore, peace lingered, patient, gentle, eternal.